Take it away, Linda.
Oh, hi. Hi, Adrian. In Costa Rica. Here I am in Northern California. Oh, wait. I can't come down. I'm in a Zoom meeting. Oh, I don't think you can go in the kitchen, look under the sink. You won't believe it, but there is a tree trying to grow up underneath my kitchen. A root from a big tree that was cut down 2 years ago is now starting to grow under my house.
You gotta
So
let
that
it
was
grow.
somebody coming to look under my sink.
You gotta create an inside outside space. You gotta just let it grow and then cut a hole in and let it grow. Do its thing.
Good idea. No, I love working with creative people and working at the Art Institute for many years. And when Adrian showed up in my class in 2013, it was a real treat because he had already done quite a bit of work, both with a still camera and with video, and had a deep relationship to one of them. And I trust he'll tell us a little bit about the scale of his family. But he had an amazing story and access and knew how to use that. And we're going to see that in spades today. But last year, yes, Adrian had a remarkable show at the Minnesota Street New Space. They acquired this big warehouse space for installation work and asked Adrian to do a solo exhibition there. And I think you only had 6 weeks to put it together or something.
Pretty
I mean,
quick.
this place is like a airplane hangar. And Adrian somehow or other built mud walls and hung things and made that place come alive with a remarkable show, and everybody paid attention to it. And so now he's running around all over the world having making more creative decisions. And he has a wonderful book out called Sugarcane and Lightning, which we could talk about a little bit, that summarizes a lot of his work. But I'm just going to turn it over to Adrian at this point so we can see some pictures.
Thank you for that introduction, and I'm grateful to be here with you all. I'm gonna share my screen and talk a little bit more about the work. So, my work, starts off and centers the women matriarchs in my family, and with my grandmother, a person who had 16 kids, 12 of those kids having 58, 58 having 112, and 112 having 158. And she left Louisiana in 1944, 45 and came to Oakland, California, her and her husband running from the Ku Klux Klan and trying to start something new in this place that they would call the Harlem of the West. And I spent a lot of time interviewing her initially and documenting every birthday, funeral, baby shower, um, mundane and quotidian moments that didn't seem like they meant a lot at the time, like this photo that I have now. Actually, I knew what this photo meant to me when I took it. My grandmother was still alive, and I was at her house, and this was the chair that she would always sit in. And I just was looking at how the light was occupying space as if it was a spirit, and just thinking about her and the impermanence of her existence and what this work would mean once she passed on. And she would say all the time, well, not to me because I loved her on purpose all the time and forever, but it's a lot of people in my family, and I think sometimes she felt that she wasn't always appreciated by everyone, though she was appreciated by a lot of people. And she would say they're gonna miss me when I'm gone. So after interviewing my grandmother, aunts, uncles, cousins, I went to Louisiana and found the oldest people alive in my family. And I interviewed them, and I wanted to understand their relationship to this sprawling network of kinship and stories that have been erased, and objects that, lie in wait in my great uncle's garage. I remember he had this spoon that was a wooden spoon that he had made. And I remember a year later, after I left Louisiana, I went to the Quilombos in Brazil, and I saw the same exact spoon, like the same craftsmanship, almost the same material that they used to make this spoon in the Quilombos in Brazil. My great uncle Sugar, who was 90, I believe he was like 93 at the time, had made this spoon sometime back in like the 40s.
Adrian, do you
Yeah.
know who this couple is?
Yes, this is my great great grandparents, George Washington Sempster on the right and Alice Smith on the left. And both of these people were born into slavery and actually helped raise my grandmother because she was orphaned as a child. So my grandmother, she had a bunch of photo albums, and I remember over the course of a week, I was going to her house every day, sitting on the couch with a scanner and just going through all the images that I can and asking her, who's this person and where was this taken, and in general, what do these images mean to you? And you know, it was something to just see her hold on to these memories and moments and pass these stories along to me. That's my grandmother and her first husband, Marvin
Wow.
Smith. This is my Uncle John in Vietnam. And I know he did 3 combat tours in Vietnam 3 years in a row. And he was there during the Tet Offensive. That's me in the bottom right corner between my brother, sister, and my mom and my cousin. That's also me as a baby on the left.
Oh,
And I have a video that I want to share with you all. So I'll come back to these photos. So there. And so, thank you for all watching it. This work, starting off from like a more documentary lens and film lens, and just really asking a lot of questions and being curious, turned into this space for ritual. It turned into this collaborative making process and praxis that I developed with my family, where relationships can be deepened and the energy can either be gathered or released for the, in my opinion, for the health and for the maintenance of cohesion and love. And back to these photos. Second. And I started to basically take the historical materials that I would gather from my familial, national, and local archives and interpret them into different types of metaphors, thinking about the materiality of our familial and lived experience in America. Okay. Share this. Can you guys see the photos?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
And so this piece here is called Antonia, and it was made from an American flag that my friend Wassam Abaji brought back from Iraq. And I tore it apart and put it back together using found fabrics and made a carbon print on top of it of my sister standing in front of a sugarcane field in East Oakland. And she's pregnant at the time. And what I'm really thinking about is I'm thinking about citizenship. I'm thinking about what it means to be uh, a Black American. And I'm thinking about unseen labor, specifically the unseen labor of Black women, not only in my family, but these erased and unknown and unnamed Venuses of the archive.
Adrian,
Yes.
I believe, didn't you bleach out all the color from that flag as well?
Yes, so I bleached out some of the color, and
Okay,
I also used like quilting in the process of quilting to create a surface that would be more receptive to the carbon print.
yeah, beautiful piece, thank you.
And this piece was also on the show. The show's called Venus Blues, and it was about a team of 15 people mixing some of them my family members, mixing about 10,000 pounds of soil and sand and putting it up on this wall and making this structure to hold this image that you see there. And it was really intensive, physically intensive. It took a lot of time, and it also fostered a type of relationship between me, myself, family members, and the extended community. So I talked about these digging into national and local archives. And one of the things I found when I dug deeper and I went back to Louisiana was these letters that were written on behalf of my ancestors who were enslaved by the Confederate Army during the Civil War. And basically, in these letters, there's maybe 35 to 40 different correspondence, and they're demanding reparations. They're in their hundreds, they're centenarians. It's the early 1930s, late 1920s, and the government is basically saying we don't pay reparations to slaves, their descendants, their widows. Stop writing us. This is useless. And so when I dug a little bit deeper, I actually found a bill of sale. And this bill of sale was from one of my ancestors who was kidnapped from northern Senegal in the 1700s and sold to French enslavers in southwestern Louisiana. And it said in the bill of sale that she had these uh, tribal markings on her stomach and that she was from the mouth of the Senegal River near a place called Pador. And so I went there when I was in residency, and I was able to talk to griots, talk to go to the National Archive, talk to locals, and really try to piece together what her life might have been like. And that was part of the inspiration for the show that was at the Minnesota Street Project, Venus Blues. And so you hear my grandmother saying in the video that uh, they're not together like they used to be anymore, and that really tears her up. She talks about only having 8 children left, and when you think about it, and you think about somebody having 16 children, and by the time they pass away, have buried more than half of them, I think I still struggle to understand what that means as a person who doesn't have children, but I can imagine the pain with burying one child. But to have 16 and bury over half of them within your lifetime, I think um, says a lot about biopolitics. It says a lot about white supremacy, and it says a lot about the inequities that are in this country and how they manifest in certain communities and families and cultures, not only within the United States, but abroad. And so with my work coming from documentary photography into documentary film into performance, and now even thinking about screenplays and narrative filmmaking. One of the things that I'm really excited about right now is that recently I got the Kenneth Reagan Foundation Fellowship, and it was for my screenplay Cousins. And Cousins is based on Cousins is based on the childhood of myself and my brother growing up in Oakland. My brother was murdered in 2015. And I remember when he was murdered, I was still going to the Art Institute and I was working on the documentary work. And so I had filmed a 1 hour long interview with him to do research for the screenplay that I was working on. I was going around with my cousins and family members, just trying to gather material and think through the textures of what the story might feel and look like. And when he was murdered, I was left with this 1 hour long interview. And I was like, what do I do with this? And so I kind of cut it up and played around with it. And I had over uh, 138 versions of this short documentary called Cousins, which was my research into the screenplay that I was working on. And so what I'll show you right now is a clip from that. Second. So my my work in documentary and my work in photography kind of all start to become these mixtapes of Black life and American histories, these ways of me digging into the textures and the experiences of not only my life, but my community, and thinking about how it helps me better understand the world, better understand characters in my writing process. Um, and also, as we know, narrative filmmaking is really expensive. And so it's like, do I not tell stories as I work on this screenplay and as I try to get the resources and the relationships to make my first feature film? No, it's like I consider myself a storyteller. So with whatever I have, whether it be a camera, whether it be my body, whether it be mud or, perform, whatever it is, I'm going to figure out a way to tell the story that I want to tell. And I think that was one of the interesting things also about SFAI is that it afforded us the the freedom and really kind of cracked our skulls open and said, okay, well, you want to tell a story, like it doesn't have, you don't need a camera to tell a story. Um you don't need a lot of money. You just figure out a way, you get creative, you get scrappy, and you do it. And really thinking about metaphors and thinking about all the different ways that you can represent a metaphor outside of using something like a camera. And so this body of work was made in 2020. That's my grandmother, my mom, and my sister. And they're wearing these steel wool hair pieces that me and my sister made together. And what I'm thinking about is this idea of the Black angel of history, these figures who travel throughout time and space to to um, to basically protect Black people during times of revolution. And I was thinking about what it would look like to be adorned with something that was only meant to be an object of utility, something like steel wool. It's very domestic, but the way it shines in the light, and at the same time, when you're working with it, it'll cut you. Like if you're not careful when you're using steel wool and you're trying to manipulate it into something, uh, whether that be something to wash dishes or whether that be something that is a work of art, it'll cut you. This image is called God Don't Like Ugly. And that's my mom standing in front of Mexicali Rose, which is a restaurant that doesn't exist anymore, but it's also right across the street from the Oakland Police Department. And so in 2020, her standing with this pistol in front of the Oakland Police Department, just it was a lot of energy to say the least. This image is called Learning to Swim. And it was working with family history and working with American and global history, it can get really dark. And this is one of the moments when I started to feel like, okay, what would it be like to put myself in front of the camera? What would it be like to try to release energy via performance that I'm holding on to from dealing with these archives and dealing with all these experiences? And I think I related to dancing. I feel like performance and dancing, it's a different language that allows your body to communicate and get out things that you wouldn't normally be able to get out with writing or talking or other forms of communication. This is Cyclical Symphony. When I went back to Senegal and I was in residency there, I was able to put together a team and we drove up and down the country looking through archives, as I said, and I collaborated with this theater group to write a monologue that would try to evoke the history of my great grandmother Venus, and really also did these rituals with people that were from there and documented it as a way of in being inducted to this place of griot as storyteller. And this is Colonel. Later on, I think I have an image of Gory Island, which is the place where one of the many doorways of no return exist in West Africa, specifically in Senegal. And the Colonel is one of the historians and the griots of Gory Island. He was born there, raised there, and knows a lot of the history. And he was able to take me around through this place that I know, um, based on my research, that it's highly likely some of my ancestors came through that gateway of no return. And so it was really uh, an amazing experience and insightful and a lot of things that I don't have words for, to be able to work with him and to be able to learn from him. This image is a part of a series called Modernity Blues, and it's just really thinking about the effects of modernity and the gravity of history on the Black body, and not only the Black body, but global South folks. And just, I had this feeling of being shot out of a cannon into the present, and the pain and the ways that your body has to contour and bring in all this history and these stories with me from the past into the present, and the pain that that takes and the strain that it can put on the body.
Mhm.
And so my book, Sugarcane and Lightning, is this mixtape of Black life and American history from my familial perspective. And I am thinking about blues epistemology from Clyde Woods. I'm thinking about what it means to create a blues moment and to continually live within these repetitions of catastrophe that, uh, how do I say, that colonialism and white supremacy have very much so like placed us in. And these images are taken in a sugarcane field in Senegal near Pador. And this is 2022. And that is my presentation.
Thank you so much, Adrian. I'm gonna bring Linda back here for the discussion and also the Q&A, but also invitation to everyone else. Please, if you have any questions, write them in the chat, and then I'll read them for you.
Adrian, can you go back to the gateway picture?
Yes.
I just think that that is such a profound image, so beautiful. But if people didn't know that passageway down to that lower doorway was, you know, the last place they stepped in Africa.
Right.
How were you able to learn that your first, or maybe one of the first maternal ancestors was named Venus?
So, you know, the people who enslaved people and thought of Black people as property and animals that didn't have souls kept records like Nazis. And so there are meticulous records that exist within not only the American Archive, National Archives, local archives, but also in Senegal. There's in their National Archive, there's a list of not all, but hundreds of slave ships that left Senegal, the year they left, what countries they went to, and there's even more archives in France that I haven't had a chance yet to travel to look at, but I'm looking forward to one day going to France to be able to go through those archives. And so, yeah, there's a lot of information. I think the issue for a lot of people who want to uncover this type of history is the disconnect between the elders and the youth. A lot of elders don't want to talk about things as painful, and that's common across most and all groups of people. But I was lucky enough to be able to have this relationship with my grandmother and other family members in Louisiana, and always be asking questions and always be writing things down. So when it came to the point where I was able to get into these archives, I was able to cross reference a lot of the information that I had gotten from my grandmother and other family members, and keep building and building and building and building on that to get to these archives.
Wonderful. Could you just clarify for everybody else? I sort of know this history. You mentioned about all the cousins and your grandmother, being pained by some of the things that happens within the family, but from what I remember, maybe I have it wrong, you telling me that there are two major gangs that were opposing gangs that sort of came out of your family. Was that because of regions of Oakland, or just what was going on there?
Yeah, so no, there's not two opposing gangs, but what the issue is that, when you look at a place like Oakland and you look at mass incarceration and you look at the war on drugs and you look at the inequities in the healthcare system, you have a lot of people who have a disproportionate, how do I say, unfair to say the least, proximity to death. And so because of that, I do have a lot of people in my family who have died from gun violence, died from health issues, living in food deserts, things like that, to the point where my grandmother is, 92, 93, and she's outlived over half of her children. And a lot of that is due to the gravity of the system and white supremacy, this thing that we don't see but we feel every day.
Thank you.
We have, it's not a question, Adrian, but a comment by Eve Werner, which I'm just going to read. Yours is the most profound and intelligent work I've ever experienced. Thank you. I wish I could have seen the installation at MSP.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about the filmmaking aspects of your work and, the screenplay you're working on? what the film that was at Minnesota Street was really powerful. Which combined your sort of performance piece, like flying around with those suitcases. And I'm sorry, I'm not forming this question very well, but could you speak a little bit more about the moving images?
Yeah, so I like to, for that film in particular, that edition that you saw is it's the Venus Blues edition of the Saint Step in Congo Time. And I was thinking about these repetitions of catastrophe. I was thinking about Clyde Woods and the blues moment. And so with uh Clyde Woods he came up with something they call blues epistemology that I'm really interested in. I've been reading up on a lot as I've been making this work. And after slavery, we have Reconstruction. And with Reconstruction, we get the Ku Klux Klan. But with the Ku Klux Klan and Reconstruction, we get the blues. And so there's this back and forth where this pendulum swings and there's this catastrophe. And within that catastrophe, there's this way that culture is created and weaponized against the structure in the system. And the blues, it wasn't just a music, it was mutual care, mutual aid organizations. It was folks arming themselves. It was folks traveling to spaces and experiencing life outside of the plantocracy, outside of the types of labor that chattel slavery demanded. It was a new realization of, and potentially a new idea of what human could be. And so when I was making this film, I was thinking about sound a lot. I was thinking about sound because when you dream in sound, your visuals are limitless. When you dream in visuals, it kind of stifles, in my opinion, where you can go sonically and where you can even go visually. So with making that film, I started off with sound. I started off with sound design and music and quotes and interviews that I had done with family members and this monologue. And then I said, okay, now that I have this sound, what visuals now go with that? Um, I also, in terms of sound and like traveling from, the film is made in Senegal. I filmed in Senegal, Oakland, Louisiana, and back and forth again. And I thought a lot about home, and I thought about a lot about belonging and how I belonged and where I belonged in either of these places. And I came to the conclusion that the sound was home. I came to the conclusion that the sound was the closest to Africa. The sound of my grandmother's voice was the closest to Africa that I'd ever get, because her voice held these speech patterns and these rhythms that have sustained through and before the Middle Passage. And so for me, that I guess that's a little bit about the Saint Step in Congo Time.
Wow.
I have a question from Lenore Maynard. Did you always know that you wanted to use your photographic and film talents to shed light on issues of colonization and slavery? Your ability to make beautiful, moving images from such tragic circumstances is quite incredible. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that, how can I say, when you see these stories, or when you hear these stories, you can think about colonization and you can think about slavery as something that is happened so long ago that is sad versus something that is still happening now. And I think that one of the things that I'm interested in this work is how the my familial experience and how the Black experience connects to a global South experience, how that connects to what's happening in Palestine, how that connects to what's happening in China with populations of the Uyghur community that are put in re-education camps, and all these things being interconnected, and figuring out a way to not only, I believe, as like Sylvia Winter might get at, think through what this new iteration of human could be, but also thinking about how we name the thing that is the point of interest in terms of what we should be combating.
I have another question, just, after the Art Institute, you went on and studied documentary film at Stanford, bravo. How was it? I mean, you have such a sort of native sense as an artist of what is important to you. You brought that with you in both cases. But then you went into these two very different education systems. You know, the sort of personalized Art Institute one, and then I'm sure the Stanford one was maybe, you know, a little more serious, or I don't know, more established. But you clearly have come out stronger in both cases. Do you want to talk about how education, how being in those institutions maybe affected your work, either hindered it or improved, made it stronger?
Yeah. You know, I think that one of the unfortunate things about institutions are the ways in which they perpetuate certain violences that have came before them that were integral in creating said institutions. And for me, I come back to Fred Moulton's quote about the only ethical relationship to the institution being theft. And so for me, being at the Art Institute and being at Stanford it was two different experiences for sure. There was definitely a sense of magic that was happening at the Art Institutes amongst, you know, not only with professors that I was able to study with, but like the students that I still collaborate and work with today. But at the same time, I always felt, and I still feel, that my position at an institution is, at any institution, is to get what I can get for my community and for the people that I love in a way that pushes my culture and the world forward. And I don't believe that these institutions are my friend.
Or what?
My friend.
We have a question by Luba Sigarevich. Can you speak more about your relationship to Louisiana? I'm based in the New Orleans area. New Orleans.
So my both sides of my family, both my mother and my father's side, comes from Louisiana. And so they come from Minden, they come from Lake Charles, New Iberia, Laurierville. I do have some distant history in Lafayette and New Orleans, but it's not as close as the other areas. And you know, I said that thing about sound, and I actually came to that realization while I was in Louisiana. You know, you go through New Orleans and like people were playing, you know, the steel drums and like dancing on the street, all these things that don't feel like America. And I remember I was in the back of this church that my family helped build in the 1800s, is still standing. And there, a lot of the ancestors that I've gone through these archives and I've seen their names, I've now seen their headstones, and I'm standing with them, like standing with the dead, literally in this graveyard. And I look across and there's a sugarcane field. And so I walk up to the sugarcane field and I put my hands in the soil, and I remember it being humid and warm and like that, the air thick. It's summertime, Louisiana. And a lightning bolt goes through the sky. And then I said, sugarcane and lightning. And that's when I came up with the title for the book. But then also that's when I thought about the sound. And I was like, okay, like, I think I know what home is.
Mm. Mm. So you're working on a screenplay. Want to give us a tidbit more of what that might be?
Yeah, it's so one of the things that I'm actually struggling with in the screenplay right now is I've done a lot of rewrites. I've done a lot of rewrites, and it was great to get the support from the Kenneth Brandon Foundation because they are not only helping introduce me to people who can be story consultants and mentors and all these different things, but growing up the way I grew up with my brothers and with my cousins, there was this close relationship between play and death. And there was this way in which, because of our proximity to death, we learned to cope with it with play. We had to make it something that wasn't as serious as it was. And it's in that lived experience, there's something that I'm trying to bring out in the film that not only like kids are kids no matter where they are. And so often society and adults want to make grown men and grown women out of people who are just children. And also, what is this relationship between play and death? And how do I convey that in a way that allows the levity of our childhood coming of age story, but also doesn't take away from the stakes of what this environment means and did to us.
I would like to ask a question too, if I'm allowed to. I really was drawn to the images where you were performing in the little bathtub and also with the suitcases, and you said something about the trauma being in the body, and you kind of can release the traumatic energy through movement or dance. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit how you can incorporate that not only in your practice but also in your community, kind of like how to share that wisdom.
Yeah, I think so. For me, like I said, it's these some images become these collective self-portraits, or they become these byproducts of rituals that happened and took place between me, my family, and community members. And with the proximity of conducting a ritual comes tension, comes heat. And when that heat and tension presents itself, it's an opportunity. That opportunity is we can either deepen a connection, we can release an energy, or we can break.
Mhm.
And in each moment of tension and heat, we have that choice. And I think that that's one of the things that I find amazing, like beautiful about working with family and working with community is being very mindful of that choice and creating new language of care and new language of reconciliation through that. So to put it another way, if I'm collaborating with my sister and she gets mad at me or I get mad at her, we can fall out and not talk for a year, or we can come together and say, hey, there's a way in which we weren't taught or we didn't see how to reconcile this difference and how to communicate how we feel and be vulnerable with one another that we now have to create. We have to create that new language right now because we didn't have it before. And through that new language, we deepen our connection, we deepen our love, and we move forward in a way stronger that we couldn't have otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me that there's you've sort of created a new balance between, like with the suitcases or many of the more performative aspects of your work is really working as metaphor. And then the documentary aspects, or the more storytelling aspects. I mean, we know that in literature pretty well, but I don't think we've seen it in film that often. And I think you're in some pretty wonderful, expansive territory.
Thank you. No, yeah, it feels, how do I say, doing the research and doing the documenting and the archiving and getting closer to people, my ancestors, material, history, international relations, all these different things. And then now coming back to playing with metaphor and how figuring out different ways to analyze and hold both the terrible and the beautiful at the same time.
You feel safe working
Safe working where?
in Oakland, for instance?
I think that there's a reality. There's a reality that I feel a lot more profoundly in Oakland or in Louisiana or in the United States in general. There's this reality of time being stacked up on top of each other like this, and me thinking that I'm in 2024, but being able to be snatched back into 1868 like that. So I think that that's a reality that I have to be at home with. And I'm always thinking of ways I'm always thinking about what that means. And I haven't really came to a conclusion on it yet, but I'm always thinking about what that means.
Amazing. It's wonderful.
We are almost at the end of this spotlight talk today. I'm reading through a couple of the other messages. We just wanted to let everyone know there was an issue with sign in for some of you, that we recorded the talk, and we're gonna upload the talk minus the video clips because the video clips are not out yet. We're gonna upload that on YouTube so you can all review the beginning of the talk. Thank you so much for being so generous, showing us videos that are not even out yet. Adrian, that was really wonderful. And any either final questions for the last 2 minutes, or Linda or Adrian, if you wanna round it up in your own words.
Adrian, your turn.
Thank you for everybody for joining. I really appreciated holding the space with you all and getting a chance to talk more about the work. And I enjoyed all of the questions, Linda. I appreciate it.
Very welcome.
And
Well,
sorry,
go
Linda,
for it.
I just want to thank you as well, because Annie, who is here as well, and we showed your work in Stockholm recently, and we had a lot of people ask us about your image. It was the image of the doors of no return. And so thank you for that. It felt really important for us to have your work in this show and be able to present it in Stockholm. Thank you. Linda?
Oh, just, yeah, amazing. And we will, I think probably every year or two, we need to catch up with Adrian and see what the hell he's up to now.
And where
I'm
he is,
sure.
Linda, right?
So, part 1.
Mm-hmm. And also, just for everyone, thank you so much, Adrian, again. Thank you so much, Linda. It was a real treat to also have you speak to each other, with knowing you know so much about each other also, and your work. And so thank you so much for that. I wanted also to let everyone know that we have film festival coming up, and one of the programs is curated by April Martin. And I think you mentioned Wissam, right, Adrian? Yeah. One of Wissam's movies is gonna play in the Juneteenth program, so keep an eye on that. And then I'm gonna stop the recording now so we can say goodbye to each other. Thank you so much, everyone,
also,
again. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. If anybody wants to pick up the book, it's Sugarcane and Lightning, and it's available through Minor Matters Publishing if you wanted to check it out.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. All right, I'm gonna stop the recording.